Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Time Lord Archive. In today's video, we'll be remembering American celebrities who have sadly passed away in recent days, as well as honoring other notable figures from around the world. Before we begin, we'd greatly appreciate it if you could show your support by giving this video a like. It truly helps the channel and means a great deal to us. Thank you. And now, let's get started. Biddy Baxter was one of the most influential figures in British children's television, transforming Blue Peter into a true cultural institution. Born in Leicester in 1933, she joined the BBC in the 1950s and moved to Blue Peter in 1962. By 1965, she had become the show's editor, a role she would hold for over 2 decades. During her tenure, she introduced the iconic Blue Peter badge, the show's famous charity appeals, and a unique personal reply system for young viewers, forging a deep connection with millions of children across the UK. Under Baxter's leadership, Blue Peter became a vibrant mix of adventure, creativity, and community spirit. She oversaw memorable challenges, globe-spanning reports, and groundbreaking broadcasts, setting the gold standard for children's programming. Known as a demanding and exacting boss, she nevertheless earned the respect of her colleagues, who credit her with shaping the careers of many presenters and crew members. After retiring in 1988, she continued to advise the BBC and remained a respected voice in broadcasting. Her achievements were recognized with numerous honors, including an MBE and a special BAFTA award celebrating her extraordinary impact. Baxter passed away in 2025 at the age of 92, leaving behind a legacy forever woven into the fabric of British television history. Manuel Maria Lorenzo Perez was a towering figure in Spanish theater, with a career that spanned more than 5 decades. Born in 1943, he graduated from the Barcelona Theatre Institute before beginning his professional journey on the Galician stage in the 1960s. His deep passion for the performing arts led him to co-found the Galician School of Drama in 1978, an institution dedicated to preserving and promoting Galician cultural identity through performance, while nurturing new generations of playwrights and actors. As both an actor and director, Lorenzo left an indelible mark on Spanish theater. He was celebrated for works such as Romería and Covastomo, the latter earning him Spain's National Prize for Dramatic Literature in 1997. His artistry also extended to film and television, with notable performances in Ursa and the acclaimed series Mareas Vivas, which brought his talent to an even wider audience. Admired for his unwavering dedication to storytelling and cultural preservation, Lorenzo inspired countless performers and theater lovers alike. He passed away in 2025 at the age of 82, leaving behind a legacy that continues to shape and influence the theatrical landscape of Galicia. Gabriela "Gabi" Novak was a beloved Croatian pop and jazz singer whose warm, soulful voice and timeless elegance made her one of the most cherished artists of the former Yugoslavia. Born in Berlin in 1936 to a Croatian father and a German mother, she spent her early years in Germany before moving to Yugoslavia, where her passion for music truly blossomed. Rising to fame in the 1960s, she captivated audiences with her emotive performances and refined style, blending the charm of pop with the sophistication of jazz influences. Her personal life was deeply intertwined with music. After her first marriage to composer Stipe Kogera ended in 1970, she wed celebrated singer-songwriter Arsen Dedić in 1973. Dedić penned many of her most memorable songs, and together they became one of Croatia's most admired artistic couples. Their only son, Matija, followed in their footsteps to become a respected jazz pianist. In 2025, tragedy struck when Matija passed away in June. His funeral marked Novak's final public appearance before her own death 2 months later, at the age of 89. She left behind a legacy of timeless recordings, enduring grace, and artistic brilliance that continues to inspire generations. Johnny Pitt, beloved mother of actor Brad Pitt, has passed away at the age of 84. A retired school counselor, Jane and her husband William, raised Brad and his younger siblings, Doug and Julie, in Springfield, Missouri. Known for her warmth, generosity, and unwavering faith, she touched the lives of everyone who had the privilege of knowing her. Her granddaughter, Sydney, remembers her as love in its purest form, recalling how Jane taught her to paint, led by example with kindness, cherished her relationship with Jesus, and found joy in life's smallest moments. She had an endless capacity to give, nurturing all 14 of her grandchildren and filling their lives with laughter, creativity, and boundless unconditional love. Although Jane preferred a quiet life out of the spotlight, she occasionally accompanied her famous son to premieres and public events. Just this past June, Brad expressed his deep gratitude to her in a televised interview, sending his love with heartfelt sincerity. Her passing leaves an irreplaceable void in the Pitt family, but her spirit will live on in every act of kindness, every treasured memory, and every heart she ever touched. Alan Bergman was one of the most celebrated lyricists of his time, whose remarkable creative partnership with his wife Marilyn produced some of the most unforgettable songs in film and television history. Born in Brooklyn in 1925, he began playing piano at the age of 6, nurturing a love for music and songwriting that would shape the course of his life. After serving in the U.S. Army during World War II, he earned degrees in music and theater before moving to Los Angeles, where fate introduced him to Marilyn Keith. The two married in 1958, embarking on a creative journey that would span more than 60 years. Together, the Bergmans crafted timeless works for legendary artists such as Frank Sinatra, Ray Charles, Tony Bennett, and Barbra Streisand, penning classics like The Way We Were and The Windmills of Your Mind. They also created beloved television themes for Maude, Good Times, and Alice, as well as Oscar-winning songs for The Thomas Crown Affair and Yentl. Their extraordinary contributions earned them 3 Academy Awards, 3 Grammy Awards, and 4 Emmy Awards, securing their place in the Songwriters Hall of Fame. Even after Marilyn's passing in 2022, Alan continued to write, fueled by an endless stream of inspiration. He passed away in 2025 at the age of 99, leaving behind a legacy of music that shaped generations and a body of work destined to inspire for decades to come. Bobby Whitlock was a force of nature in the world of music, an American blues rock artist best remembered for his work alongside Eric Clapton, and as a founding member of Derek and the Dominos. Born in Memphis in 1948, he grew up immersed in the soulful sounds of Stax Records, learning to master the Hammond organ and performing with legends like Sam and Dave and Booker T and the MGs. In 1968, Whitlock joined Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, a pivotal move that brought him into Clapton's circle and set the stage for music history. 2 years later, he co-founded Derek and the Dominos, co-writing timeless tracks for their landmark album Layla and other assorted love songs, including Tell the Truth, Bell Bottom Blues, and Why Does Love Got to Be So Sad? His raw, soul-drenched vocals and distinctive keyboard style became a signature part of the band's sound, also shining on George Harrison's All Things Must Pass. Throughout the 1970s, Whitlock released several acclaimed solo albums before stepping away from the spotlight. He returned in the late 1990s, recording and touring with his wife, Coco Carmel, reintroducing the magic of the Dominos to a new generation of fans. Known for his passion, resilience, and timeless songwriting, Bobby Whitlock passed away in 2025 at the age of 77, leaving behind a legacy woven deep into the fabric of rock history. Raymond Michael Brooks was a legendary figure in British entertainment, leaving behind a legacy that spanned more than 5 decades. Born in Brighton in 1939, he began his career with early television appearances in shows such as Coronation Street and Taxi, hinting at the charisma and screen presence that would define his journey. His big break came with the Palme d'Or winning film The Knack and How to Get It, followed by the acclaimed drama Cathy Come Home, cementing his place among the most memorable faces of the 1960s. Over the years, Brooks became more than just a familiar actor. He became a voice that millions grew up with. From narrating Mr. Ben and King Rollo, to lending his warm, reassuring tones to countless commercials, his voice carried a sense of comfort and familiarity. In the 1980s, he returned to primetime fame with the BBC hit Big Deal, later reuniting with co-star Sharon Deuce in Growing Pains. His career remained vibrant into the 2000s, with standout roles in 2,000 Acres of Sky and a memorable turn as Joe Macer in EastEnders. Respected for his versatility, admired for his charm, and remembered for performances that touched multiple generations, Raymond Michael Brooks's work remains an enduring part of British culture. He passed away in 2025 at the age of 86, leaving behind a body of work and a voice that will never be forgotten. Willie Hugh Nelson was born on April 29, 1933, in Abbott, Texas, a small farming community with fewer than 300 residents at the time. His early life was marked by both hardship and the quiet resilience of rural living during the Great Depression. Not long after his birth, his parents separated, his father moved away, and his mother left as well, leaving Willie and his older sister, Bobby, in the care of their paternal grandparents, Alfred and Nancy Nelson. Deeply religious and deeply musical, the Nelson grandparents wove faith, community, and song into the fabric of daily life. Gospel hymns and folk ballads filled their home, and an upright piano, on which Bobby developed remarkable skill, stood at the heart of the household's music-making. At 6 years old, Willie received his first guitar. By 7, he was already crafting simple songs, turning the rhythms of farm life, small-town happenings, and his own feelings into melodies. Music became both his language and his escape. In his teens, he was performing at church gatherings, school events, and local dance halls, playing not just country and gospel, but also polka and western swing, an eclectic mix shaped by Texas's diverse musical heritage. At Abbott High School, Nelson dabbled in sports like football and basketball, but his true commitment was to music. He joined the Texans, a polka band formed by local bohemian families, and spent his spare time taking odd jobs, picking cotton, delivering newspapers, and fixing radios to fund better instruments and sound equipment. These early hustles instilled in him the grit and respect for working-class life that would later define much of his songwriting. After graduating in 1950, Nelson enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, but chronic back problems cut his service short after just 9 months. He then enrolled at Baylor University in Waco, studying agriculture, but classrooms held less pull than honky-tonks. Dropping out after 2 years, he resolved to chase music full-time. In the early 1950s, Nelson found work as a radio disc jockey in Texas and later in the Pacific Northwest. By day, he spun the latest country records. By night, he performed in smoky bars and roadside clubs. This period sharpened his performance skills and helped him shape a style that blended country, folk, and blues into something uniquely his own. His first major break came not behind a microphone, but with a pen. In the late 1950s, Nelson moved first to Houston and then to Nashville, struggling at first but slowly earning a name as a songwriter. His compositions, among them Nightlife, Funny How Time Slips Away, and Crazy, immortalized by Patsy Cline in 1961, were distinctive for their conversational lyrics, emotional nuance, and unexpected chord changes. Long before the public knew him as a performer, Nashville insiders recognized him as a songwriter of rare talent. By the early 1960s, Nelson began recording his own albums, though they met with only modest success. His laid-back phrasing and unconventional style clashed with the highly produced Nashville sound, dominating country radio. Still, he toured relentlessly, building a loyal regional fan base across Texas, Oklahoma, and neighboring states. These early years, rooted in the small-town values of Abbott, tempered by hard work and frequent rejection, formed the bedrock of Willie Nelson's identity. The perseverance he showed as a struggling DJ, songwriter, and performer would fuel the breakthrough that lay ahead, setting the stage for him to become one of the most influential figures in American music. By the mid-1970s, Willie Nelson was poised to redefine not just his own career, but the entire landscape of country music. After years of frustration with the rigid string-heavy Nashville sound, he returned to Texas and immersed himself in the vibrant, rebellious Austin music scene, which embraced a raw, unpolished blend of country, rock, and folk. This atmosphere, combined with Nelson's distinctive songwriting and his newfound freedom from restrictive record contracts, set the stage for his rise to superstardom. In 1975, Nelson released Red-Headed Stranger, an album that would become a landmark in country music history. Recorded on a shoestring budget and featuring sparse, intimate arrangements, the album told the story of a fugitive preacher and was unlike anything coming out of Nashville at the time. Columbia Records executives feared it was too unconventional to sell, but the public proved them wrong, thanks in large part to the hauntingly beautiful single Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, which became Nelson's first #1 hit as a singer. The album's success established him as one of the leaders of the outlaw country movement, alongside Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, and Kris Kristofferson. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, Nelson was unstoppable. He followed up with a string of critically acclaimed and commercially successful albums, including Stardust 1978, a surprising collection of pop standards that showcased his versatility and broadened his audience far beyond country fans. The record remained on the country charts for an astonishing 10 years. His collaborations during this period were equally impactful. The supergroup The Highwaymen with Jennings, Kristofferson, and Johnny Cash created a country music powerhouse that celebrated the outlaw ethos and drew massive crowds worldwide. Nelson's live performances during this era became legendary, with his trusty Martin N20 guitar, affectionately named Trigger, and his unmistakable braids and bandana. He cut an instantly recognizable figure on stage. His concerts often blended tight musicianship with an easygoing, communal atmosphere, inviting audiences into his world as if they were all old friends gathered around a campfire. Beyond music, Nelson's peak years also saw him transition into acting, with notable roles in films such as The Electric Horseman, 1979, alongside Robert Redford, and Honeysuckle Rose, 1980, which mirrored his own life as a traveling musician. These ventures cemented his image as a rugged, free-spirited troubadour who moved effortlessly between art forms. By the mid-1980s, Willie Nelson was not just a country star, he was a cultural icon. He used his platform to champion causes he cared about, most famously through Farm Aid, the benefit concert series he co-founded in 1985 with Neil Young and John Mellencamp to support struggling American farmers. The inaugural event drew over 80,000 people and featured some of the biggest names in music, signaling Nelson's influence well beyond the country genre. This era represented the pinnacle of Willie Nelson's commercial and artistic power. He had complete creative control over his work, a loyal fan base spanning generations, and the respect of his peers across musical genres. His voice, weathered yet warm, became one of the most recognizable sounds in American music, and his songs, whether his own or interpretations of others, continued to resonate with an authenticity that could not be manufactured. Yet, even at the height of his fame, Nelson remained grounded in his Texas roots, preferring the company of friends, fellow musicians, and his beloved horses to the trappings of Hollywood glamour. This combination of global stardom and down-home humility only deepened the public's affection for him, ensuring that his peak career years would be remembered not just for their commercial triumphs, but for the genuine humanity at their core. Despite his easygoing image and the warmth he inspired in fans, Willie Nelson's life in the late 1980s and early 1990s was anything but smooth. For a man who had always walked the line between country music's traditions and the free-spirited outlaw ethos, controversy was almost inevitable, but some storms that hit him were larger than anything he could have predicted. The most infamous crisis came in 1990, when Nelson was hit with a staggering tax bill from the Internal Revenue Service. The IRS claimed he owed over $16 million in unpaid taxes, a debt inflated by penalties and interest. The situation was the result of bad financial advice and questionable investments made by his accounting firm, Price Waterhouse, which had assured him that aggressive tax shelters were legal. When those shelters were disallowed, Nelson was left holding the bill. In a dramatic and humiliating moment, federal agents raided his Texas ranch and other properties, seizing nearly everything of value, including gold records, instruments, and even personal memorabilia, to auction off for repayment. Rather than hide, Nelson responded in his own unorthodox way. In 1991, he released the IRS tapes Who'll Buy My Memories, a stripped-down acoustic album sold through television infomercials, with proceeds going directly toward his tax debt. The move was both practical and defiant, turning a personal catastrophe into a piece of pop culture history. Fans rallied behind him, buying the album and attending benefit concerts, helping him pay off the massive debt within a few years. Beyond his financial troubles, Nelson often found himself at the center of cultural and political debates. A longtime advocate for the legalization of marijuana, he was arrested multiple times for possession. Incidents that generated headlines but also reinforced his image as a man who stood by his beliefs. His outspoken views on environmentalism, biodiesel fuels, and progressive politics also set him apart in the often conservative world of country music, earning him both loyal supporters and vocal critics. In the mid-1990s, Nelson was also forced to navigate personal losses and career shifts. The changing landscape of country music, dominated by polished hat acts like Garth Brooks and Clint Black, left less room for the raw, genre-bending style Nelson had championed. Some industry insiders whispered that his time in the spotlight had passed. While he still maintained a loyal fan base, radio airplay for his new material dwindled and record sales slowed compared to his heyday. Rumors and tabloid stories occasionally swirled around his personal life, particularly about his marriages and relationships. Nelson himself never shied away from admitting to his flaws, often recounting his romantic missteps with humor and candor in interviews. But the combination of legal troubles, political controversy, and shifting industry tastes created an undeniable period of uncertainty in his career. Yet through all the turbulence, Nelson's core identity remained unshaken. Even when faced with crushing debt, public scrutiny, and an evolving music scene that seemed to leave him behind, he refused to conform or retreat. In many ways, these crises only deepened his legend, casting him as a survivor who could weather storms with the same calm resilience he brought to his songs. This chapter of his life could easily have marked a permanent downturn. Instead, it became a crucible that tested his resolve and set the stage for one of the most remarkable comebacks in modern music history. The years following Willie Nelson's financial and public challenges could have spelled the end for many artists. Yet for Nelson, they marked the beginning of one of the most remarkable reinventions in American music. By the mid-1990s, with his IRS debt behind him, Nelson embraced a freer, more independent path, unshackled from the pressure of chasing mainstream radio success and unafraid to follow his instincts wherever they led. One of his first steps toward reclaiming his place in the spotlight was leaning into collaboration. He recorded with an eclectic mix of artists, from fellow country legends like Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings to rockers such as Neil Young and pop icons like Julio Iglesias. His 1993 duet with Iglesias, To All the Girls I've Loved Before, had already proven that genre boundaries meant little to him, and he continued that spirit in later projects. These partnerships not only reintroduced him to new audiences, but also underscored his ability to bridge generations and styles. In 1998, Nelson released Teatro, produced by Daniel Lanois, a moody, atmospheric album that was a departure from his earlier work. While not a commercial blockbuster, it earned critical acclaim and reminded the industry that Nelson was still willing to take creative risks. By the early 2000s, his career had gained fresh momentum, fueled by a blend of nostalgia for his classics and admiration for his artistic fearlessness. Nelson also began touring with renewed vigor, often performing over 150 shows a year, well into his 70s and 80s. His concerts became communal celebrations, part honky-tonk, part folk revival, part political rally. He used his platform to champion causes close to his heart, from farm aid to environmental activism, solidifying his role as both a cultural figure and a humanitarian. His annual participation in Farm Aid, the benefit concert he co-founded in 1985 with John Mellencamp and Neil Young, kept him connected to the grassroots communities he had long supported. A particularly symbolic moment of his return came with the release of Willie Nelson and Friends, Stars and Guitars, in 2002, a televised concert event that brought together a diverse lineup of artists to celebrate his legacy. It wasn't just a tribute. It was proof that Nelson was no longer just a relic of the past, but a living, evolving part of the music world. The 2010s brought even more accolades. His albums God's Problem Child 2017 and Ride Me Back Home 2019 received Grammy recognition, proving that age had not dulled his songwriting or performance abilities. Nelson's weathered voice, now as rough as the Texas plains, carried a depth and authenticity that resonated with audiences old and new. Outside of music, Nelson's public image softened into that of a national treasure, a wise, humorous, and outspoken elder statesman of American culture. He became a beloved figure in television interviews, commercials, and even cameo appearances in films. His open discussions about aging, mortality, and marijuana legalization made him seem as approachable as a neighbor sitting on a porch, even as his legendary status loomed large. By the time he entered his late 80s, Nelson had accomplished the improbable, transforming from a man on the brink of financial ruin and fading relevance into a universally respected icon whose influence spanned country, folk, pop, and beyond. His journey back was not marked by a single triumphant moment, but by a steady, unyielding commitment to his art, his values, and his fans. Willie Nelson's resurrection was more than a career comeback. It was a cultural reaffirmation. It proved that true artistry can endure storms, adapt to changing times, and emerge not just intact, but stronger, richer, and more meaningful than before. Willie Nelson's legacy is woven into the very fabric of American music and culture. Over a career spanning more than 6 decades, he has not only helped shape the sound of country music, but has also redefined its boundaries, influencing countless artists across genres. His impact is measured not only in record sales, awards, or chart positions, but in the enduring spirit of independence and authenticity that he inspired in generations of musicians. One of Nelson's greatest contributions lies in the outlaw country movement of the 1970s, a cultural rebellion that challenged Nashville's tightly controlled recording industry. Alongside Waylon Jennings, Chris Christopherson, and others, Nelson proved that artists could retain creative control, record on their own terms, and still reach massive audiences. This ethos of artistic autonomy resonated deeply with future generations, paving the way for today's independent country, Americana, and folk artists. His songwriting, simple yet profoundly poetic, has set a gold standard for lyrical storytelling. Songs like Crazy, Always on My Mind, and On the Road Again are not just hits, they've become part of America's musical DNA. Aspiring songwriters study his ability to convey universal emotions with plain-spoken elegance, while seasoned musicians marvel at the seamless blend of country, jazz, blues, and folk in his guitar playing. Nelson's influence also stretches beyond music. His activism, particularly in founding Farm Aid in 1985, brought national attention to the struggles of family farmers and rural communities. Through annual benefit concerts, he not only raised millions of dollars but also kept agricultural issues in the public conversation for decades. His advocacy for marijuana legalization, environmental sustainability, and animal rights further cemented his image as a progressive, compassionate voice in American public life. Generationally, Nelson has managed to bridge divides that often separate musical eras. He has recorded with everyone from Ray Charles to Snoop Dogg, from Norah Jones to Casey Musgraves, proving that his artistry transcends age, style, and cultural background. Younger artists often cite him as both a mentor and a symbol of the integrity they aspire to uphold. Awards and honors have poured in over the years. Induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame, multiple Grammys, the Library of Congress Gershwin Prize for Popular Song, and the Kennedy Center Honors, among many others. Yet perhaps the truest measure of his legacy is found in the way his music continues to resonate, not as nostalgic artifacts, but as living, breathing songs that still speak to the human experience. Willie Nelson's cultural footprint extends even further through his persona. The braids, the battered guitar trigger, the ever-present twinkle in his eye, all have become symbols of resilience, rebellion, and warmth. In a rapidly changing music industry, Nelson remains a reassuring constant, a reminder that success need not come at the cost of authenticity. Ultimately, Nelson's influence is about more than music. It's about the possibility of a life lived on one's own terms, about the courage to stand for one's beliefs, and about the belief that even in hardship, there's room for humor, compassion, and grace. His legacy is not only preserved in recordings and awards, but in the countless lives, artists, fans, and farmers alike, that he has touched. Willie Nelson didn't just write songs, he wrote a philosophy of living. and in doing so, he ensured that his influence would endure long after the last encore fades into the Texas night. For all his success, resilience, and the joy his music has brought to millions, Willie Nelson's life has not been without deep and enduring heartbreak. Among the many trials he has faced, financial troubles, the loss of friends, and the grind of life on the road, there is one sorrow that stands apart, leaving an indelible scar on his heart: the death of his son, Billy Nelson. Billy, Nelson's third child, was a talented musician in his own right, inheriting not only his father's musical ear but also his sensitivity. Yet behind Billy's quiet charm lay a battle with depression that would prove devastating. In December 1991, at just 33 years old, Billy took his own life at his home in Tennessee. For Willie, the news was shattering. The man who had sung of heartache in countless songs suddenly found himself face to face with a pain so raw it defied the healing power of music. Nelson has spoken only sparingly about that day, and when he does, there is a quiet, unshakable weight in his words. Friends recall how, in the weeks that followed, he withdrew into himself, grappling with a grief that seemed bottomless. Music, his lifelong refuge, became both a lifeline and a burden. It could express his sorrow, but it could not undo the loss. He later recorded songs that hinted at his grief, not in the explicit telling of the tragedy, but in the mournful, aching spaces between the notes. This sorrow also deepened his empathy. Those close to him say that, after Billy's passing, Nelson became even more attuned to the struggles of others. His work with charitable causes gained a new intensity, particularly his efforts to support those dealing with mental health challenges. While he rarely made public speeches about suicide or depression, his quiet acts of kindness multiplied, visiting hospitals, sending support to families in crisis, and donating anonymously to related causes. Yet, as with all deep wounds, the loss never truly healed. Friends have noticed that certain songs, especially the ones about longing, loss, or the passing of time, carry a different weight when he sings them now. In his performances, there are moments when his voice catches, when the pause between verses is just a little longer, as if he's touching that invisible thread that still connects him to his son. For Willie Nelson, the greatest sorrow of his life was not a failed business venture, a professional slight, or a lost fortune. It was the irreplaceable absence of a child. It was a reminder that even a man who has seen nearly every corner of the world, who has stood before millions, who has turned personal hardship into universal art, is not immune to the most intimate and devastating forms of loss. And yet, in true Willie fashion, he chose not to let that sorrow turn to bitterness. Instead, he folded it into his music, his activism, and his outlook on life. He carried it with him, quietly, like a worn guitar pick in his pocket, always there, shaping his art, deepening his humanity, and reminding those who love his music that even the brightest lights cast shadows.